Welcome everybody to the Crush the Quote webinar series, a webinar series where we like to bring insights, information from world-class experts who talk about leadership, sales enablement, and business in general. We aim to change the way people think, the way they behave, and hopefully how they achieve their goals overall. With us today, we are talking about building high-performing sales factory, which is, I guess, just a fancy title for a conversation that Kunal and I are going to have about what is a sales play, how do you build them, and what does an effective sales play look like when it's executed well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. With me on the line, I have Kunal Mehta, expert partner at Bain & Company. Kunal has been working with executive teams to accelerate growth through innovative analytic design and various go-to-market strategies. So he's well versed in this area. He's had a lot of involvement in private equity, where he spearheaded global sales operations and marketing programs for efficient revenue growth. So if anyone knows about sales plays, it's Kunal. So welcome Kunal to our little show. Right, so Kunal, thank you again for joining us today. I know how super busy you are. The first question I wanted to ask you is, what do we actually mean by a sales play?
Well, it's good to be here, and thanks for having me here. And let's see, the goal of the sales play is really to establish kind of a scalable, targeted, and effective go-to-market mechanism where everybody's working together kind of as a cross-functional team. In the best organizations that we work with, they can decide and launch a play in 4 weeks. They can run anywhere from 2 to 4 of these at once. And when you see it done well, the average revenue growth from these sales plays accelerate anywhere from 20 to 40%, and win rates go up 4%. So that's kind of what we mean by a sales play.
So you've already started to talk about some of the benefits of a sales play. What are the challenges that a well-executed sales play does address for heads of sales?
So I think when we look at the problems that sales play system or sales plays resolve, first you find everybody knows there's kind of these congenital bottlenecks inside the organization, but they take forever to get addressed, or they don't get addressed at all. We just ran a project at a company that has 3,000 sales reps and roughly $5 billion in revenue, and their problems are similar to much more nimble companies that are sub 100 million that we work with as well. But you could see anywhere from tech bottlenecks where reps can customize email cadences. You see tech integrations not working. In this case, which is like not dissimilar from other companies, the leads were routed incorrectly because the routing was broken, and that shows up with things like leads with no owners or no status. Reps were not recording activity in the CRM. In this case, only 16% of the activity was recorded, but you see that similar trend in almost every other sales play or you ever see run. You have a chance to address that. I think in this specific case, we targeted professional service organizations. We targeted 400 accounts. In the first 30 days, we had generated 30 opportunities. If you go back and look at the way they were running plays, they were much more generic and kind of targeted at a much broader audience. If you look at a similar time period, they were generating something like 5 opportunities over a 30-day period. So you got a kind of a 6 times improvement with that focus. So I guess to answer your question, what challenges does it solve? One, you get really targeted on the accounts. You build a much more curated experience for those accounts. You have meeting and inspection around the cadence to drive that accountability. But I think just as importantly, you have a method to kind of learn quickly what worked and what did not, so you can address those limitations.
And overall, is the overarching purpose to build a pipeline and drive growth?
Yeah, so the overall goal is obviously more closed won, but you also want better conversion rates. You want to do it more efficiently. The way we kind of one thing, just with the private equity background, we measure go-to-market chaos with something we call the sales and marketing efficiency ratio, or the magic number, which I'm sure Jacques uses as well over and over again. But you basically take year-over-year growth and you divide it by the sales and marketing expense, and you get a ratio. And if that ratio is 0.3, as an example, for every dollar you put in sales and marketing, you're getting 30 cents in new growth. If I look at a company and all of their comparable peer sets are getting 75 cents of growth for every dollar, I know I have a problem in sales and marketing. I know I have a fever. I may not know why I have a fever, but typically it shows up in these organizations just not working well together. A lot of waste. The folks inside those organizations feel the waste and feel the burden of that.
So that leads me then nicely to the next question. How do issues with alignment between sales, marketing, and other relevant teams affect the effectiveness of sales plays?
I guess in the issue of alignment, I guess there's three disconnects that I see overall. I think issue one is certainly there's fragmentation between not just sales and marketing, but the customer organization as well, where everyone's kind of doing their own work. If on the last call that we had, we talked about the day one list, where what the day one list is 90% of buyers, when they go out and go to solve a problem, they already have 3 vendors in mind, and 92% of the time they buy from one of those 3 vendors. So it's critically important. Marketing has a incredible role here in terms of getting on the day one list and providing all the tools to do that, and using all the tools at their disposal to do that. So that again, you see disconnects there. It shows up in poor conversion rates across the pipeline. We've seen this trend of higher pipeline coverage ratios year over year, and that has to do with kind of this disconnect as well. I think the second disconnect you see is just data fragmentation. You have these huge tech stacks in place. If you just take a look at what's in the CRM, what's in MarTech, what are they using in terms of paid media, email, SEO, clickstream, product usage, survey data, website data, content data, marketing automation data, finance data. And there's usually some poor person trying to connect all the wires and make sense of it all. But there's lots of ways to, because of that data fragmentation, you end up with a lot of silos, and it shows up in the company as people just arguing over data. I think disconnecting 3 is really a leadership issue, and I think it's more important, I'd say imperative than ever, for leaders to kind of build this connective tissue so that they can fix some of these issues both across data and kind of just break down some of these silos or fragmentation across different functions.
The other disconnect, based on what you're saying and the effectiveness of sales plays, and I'd love to hear from the others on the phone if they agree with all these disconnect points, is just seems to be this historic divide between sales and marketing. And sales doesn't understand what marketing's doing. Marketing thinks they're delivering everything that sales needs, but when you ask sales, they don't even know what marketing's doing. And we just don't seem to ever have gotten past this. Do you guys, the folks on the line, have you seen that as well in other organizations?
I think when it comes to sales and marketing, it's always been a little bit of a challenge to get them always to be on the same page. When I was CFO, for example, we used to have a line in the financials that was called sales and marketing, the whole budget. And then we realized that sales bring in the revenue, marketing spends it. So they kind of were, that was the reality of the personalities as well. So we separated them, actually. A little anecdote.
Oh, wow. So you, in that case, actually separated the two organizations.
But,
Interesting.
That's fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
we just did a. I was just saying, Catherine, we did a. We just finished a study, kind of to quantify what the disconnect was, and I think one of the key data points that came out of it is 55% of sales and marketing organizations are basically divorced from each other. And then the rest of the study is going to talk about the downstream impact of that and some of the metrics behind that. So at least 50% or more of companies have this issue, and it's hugely expensive.
If I may add something to that, Kunal, that's interesting, because when we had the marketing proposals, basically the marketing EVP used to tell us half of the marketing campaigns are not going to work, but we can't tell you which half. So effectively,
Right.
there is that idea that marketing is going to make some bad investments, but sales will always bring in good revenue.
One of the things that I think, in a sales play that's undervalued or not well done is the training and coaching aspect. Maybe you can talk to how you've done some of that as well. Your coaching framework, how you coach across these plays. I think that'd be super cool for your listeners to hear as well.
So are you referring to the coaching conversation framework? Is that
That
what
and when you're running a sales play, how do you run the enablement for these plays as well?
Right. Yes. So what we've done, and we've done this many times, is when you are ready to launch your sales play to the field, you can't just produce the messaging and the assets and then throw it over the divider and say, yay, here you go, thou shalt go sell. You have to actually pause, and you have to bring people in together, and you have to do two things. You have to inspire them to be part of this and realize, hey, there's something in it for me. If I go sell this thing, this bundle, this offering, whatever the sales play is focused on, like, I can win. So what's in it for me? And so whether companies want to create compensation around that, that's an option. We also we gamify them, so we make it an internal competition between sellers, teams, and there are some real prizes at the end, team prizes, individual prizes. So you need to inspire them and get them interested, but then you need to equip them. Well, what is the message around this? Why are we doing this? Who are we targeting? What's the problems we're solving for our customers with these solutions? What's the value prop? What are the assets we've made available to them? When do I use them? How do I use them? And then sometimes associated skills, because a lot of it is outreach skills that are needed. And a lot of sellers don't do outreach for a lot of different reasons. Some being just, there's just no bias towards action, and they're sitting back and waiting for the marketing to show up with the leads, right? And there's been no culture of bias to wait towards action. Other organizations are very inbound driven, and so that's like a wait kind of mindset there. So we have to kind of challenge them and equip them to go do that outreach. So we then need to bring skills to the table as well. How do you open a call? How do you leave an effective voicemail? How do you do that for an executive versus another person? Jacques, did you have any comments on that? I'd love your view. And Jürgen, I'd love your view on that too, in terms of getting sellers to do more outreach. Because if they are not going to do the outreach, the sales play doesn't work, right?
Yeah, so I think that the difference between sales plays and often marketing-led campaigns is that you do from sales, you find specific products you want to launch or have more hype on that is not part of the ordinary, maybe long-term marketing campaign. So we have to remember that marketing are doing long stretches that are strategically very well played, but sometimes you need to do a tactical increase of your revenue, and that's how I see we have used the sales plays in the old days. So we studied the market, we studied what our products could do, and then we made a fit to that and a specific package to the sales team and got them involved. But obviously you need the sellers and the leaders highly involved. And normally
Yes.
we would also have a spiff or an incentive that if they did something with these sales plays, we kind of gave them a bit more extra commission as we went along. But it has to be driven from the top of the sales organization quite often, with the regional or whatever it is managers you have, depending on how large an organization you've had. But I think we've seen it at least work a few times, at least where I've been, in both large and smaller companies. But it's a different way. It's a bit more like sniper tactics than throwing out the B-52 bombs with letters all over the place and hoping people will pick them up. So you obviously have to make very good search on your customer list and your prospect list to get the right configuration in of, are they actually in the center of what you think that they would be a kind of a buyer. And then the sellers need to lift the phone.
Right. I do like your view on marketing being more the longer term campaigns and the sales plays being more the sort of the shorter term revenue programs. I like that perspective. Jacques, did you have any comments? Shelley, what about you?
I think I would echo a little bit what Jorgen said, especially that a lot of the middle to lower rank salespeople are compensated on a quarterly basis, whereas the marketing is more of a longer term, minimum 1 year bonuses, etc. So there is a little pressure on the sales force as well, and a little bit of disconnect in terms of marrying the two organizations.
Yeah, another great point. So in terms of those measurements then, Kunal, what metrics do you track, should you track, to evaluate the success of a sales play? And how do you determine whether it's working as intended?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I might frame that in terms of how we run a sales play, and then what are the metrics we use, if that works for you.
Oh yeah, we'd love to.
Okay. All right. So when I look at if I look at a framework for sales plays, there's 3 components. Like, what's the sales play you're going to run? You can call it calling the play. What do you need to build out to run the play? And then there's a win room component. So I'll just break those down and then back into, how do we measure? So when we call a play, you want to build an inventory of reusable plays. So what we typically do is inside the base and for new logos, we'll have something like a propensity model that determines who is the highest, who has the highest propensity to either expand or buy new. At Bain, they call that money map because it shows you where the money is. But if you're not starting there, you can certainly look at where you have high win rates as a starting point, and you can model kind of the win path. And I think one of your other speakers did that, and kind of the lose path. When you do this, when you follow a win path and you've modeled it out, you will find higher ASPs, lower days to close, faster conversions. And when you model out the losing path, from your closed losses, you'll often see smaller ops that sit longer, lower conversions, the dates closed, the dates change multiple times. So it's good to just have that surveillance up front. And then for new logos, who's using outdated tech, or you might have complementary solutions. So, we ran a case where if Workday was installed, the win rate was, 350% higher than when it wasn't there. So obviously we're going to focus on the Workday install base. We needed another a project where 3 technologies were installed. This specific technology worked better. So again, we're going to look at where those technologies are installed. But once you analytically, once you determine where you have high win rates and where you're, which are the accounts you're going to target, then you start to build out kind of your inventory of assets. Is the value prop correct? Does it engage? Who owns the outreach? Does everyone understand their role in the outreach? Do we have email, templates, elevator pitches, buyer personas? Which customers and prospects are we targeting? When you get the meeting, does our sales team have the right talking points? Do they follow up? Do they understand the ROI behind their discovery, where the competition fits in? Do we have case studies? When I started my career as a sales rep, a golden outcome was if I had a prospect and I introduced them to a customer that had already solved the problem, it was almost like 100% close rate. So does our team know those case studies, and do they have client references? Do we have the right proposals in place? Do we have the right offer in place? Again, so those are some of the things to build out the play. And then I think the thing that brings it all together, the third component, is what we call the win room. It's almost this, in addition to the analytics backbone on what play we should run and who we should target, it's almost, you need to start by micromanaging the process. So we sent these emails, what worked, what did not work, did they open the emails, did they not open the emails? We set up the meeting, did it result in a second meeting? If it did, what are the next steps? Did we do the next steps? What did we learn if a meeting didn't convert to a second meeting? But more importantly, if they did convert, what did work, and how do we build that into our learning? And we go along the entire opportunity cycle and on a step-by-step basis, and this test and learn process and building kind of this learning culture becomes important in terms of getting better and better and better over time. But the role of this win room is to kind of make sure these sales plays get executed consistently, tracked, and that everybody's doing what they say they're going to be doing in terms of next steps, and then constantly learning and iterating. So I'll give you an example. We ran a play. This is a food services company. And a lot of these large companies are actually in much worse shape. That's probably a lesson for me at Bain than some of the smaller tech companies that we worked with in the past. But we ran a play that was targeting certain size hospitals where we just had high win rates. So super simple kind of model to build. We had a number of local references, with the accounts we were targeting, and a compelling offer. We also had interns. Our interns call all these. There's not a lot of hospitals like in this size, so they just called and said, "Hey, when's the renewal date for your food service contract, and are you happy?" So we had that as well. So the results were on the very first sales play, we generated 40 million in new pipeline. This had an average 12-month close. 20 million of that pipeline has closed now, and we only launched that with a handful of reps. If we kind of fast forward a year later, at this point, this company is launching a new sales play every 4 weeks. When they launch the play, they're not perishable. That investment in content and building the muscle and the training has a very long shelf life. And across the funnel, we'll measure, do we have, are our open rates from emails getting better? Are we setting up more meetings? Are the conversions across each stage improving? Are the ASPs going up? Are we building more, not only more pipeline, but are we closing more? And then are we able to specifically to measure what leads are working and which are not? So hopefully that was a lot of talking, but hopefully that got you to some of the metrics. Ultimately, we need to measure, what did we generate more revenue as the ultimate, but lagging indicator.
Are there any other critical success factors from anybody on the call that you want to share that are vital to the success of an effective sales play?
Maybe to add a few things on to what Kanal was just talking about, I think you also have to differentiate it against the complexity of the sales, the solution you're selling, the pricing. Is it a $100 bid, or is it a $2 million deal you're trying to get? But I think one of the things we did was successfully was we involved key players from the sales team in the beginning when we actually designed the sales play. So you had an ambassador in the team that was going to execute it. The second thing we did was we had a very good inside sales team, and we actually had them doing the first initial calls to a lot of the people to get a scheduled time with an expert, which is the salesperson that would then call them in. That took off the burden from the salespeople that had other things to do than running the campaign. And then we set up meetings. I was leading the sales place centrally. So the manager of the team we talked to, and the person spoke with the telesales person, and we actually handed over the stuff both verbally and writtenly to them so that they were kind of obliged to get in contact with the customer, because you can't throw over leads over the fence, as we know, because they're not going to be picked up. So we actually had this manager to manager, salespeople to salespeople, and made an agreement to follow up or not follow up. I think that showed quite a good help for everybody, and especially that they were involved in the beginning. And the other thing we did was, it was fairly technical solutions we were selling. We interviewed the best pre-sales guy, and then we rewrote his words into a sales pitch. And that seemed to be quite effectful as well, because he was not capable, or the person was not capable of passing the message to the sales team, because there was a lot of techie language. But if you convert it into a sales language, you got the right points in front of the customers very early in the stage. That was a second booster for us, definitely.
One of the other critical success factors that we have seen is a lot of the execution of a sales play is a massive coordination task, making sure that, emails are being sent, prospecting calls are being booked, in between calls are being scheduled, and that people are reminded of things, they're doing it, content is being delivered when it needs to be delivered. So it becomes quite a massive coordination task. It needs a really strong internal coordinator to support. It's as a supplier, it's a little harder for us because we're not inside the account. We don't know all the players. We don't have access to people's calendars, etc. So it's harder. And it's like 7,000 emails just to get a call scheduled, as opposed to somebody. So having that internal coordination champion is vital, just as vital as it is having the senior level support.
Yeah, and that's a critical point. I think that when I talk about the win room, it almost has an executive sponsor to make sure all this connective tissue is happening, and then a pretty senior person coordinating to make sure everybody's doing what they say. Jürgen, to your point though, I just wanted to share something that we see a lot. So the way to look at this is if I take let's say there's 100 reps and the top 20 are in tier 1, the next 20 are in tier 2, the next 20 are in tier 3. So this is an example where tier 1, so 20% of the reps bought in 52% of the revenue. Usually tier 4 and 5 typically are new starters, but then we're going to look at kind of ramp, how do people move through tiers over time. What we found across a lot of different companies are when reps are in 4 and especially in 5, they almost never move from tier to tier, yet they stay in companies a really long time. And once tier 1 reps are in tier 1, they usually stay there like almost 70% of the time. But tier 1's critically important in terms of unpacking, like what are they doing to gain access, and how are they having successful meetings, and how are they building a shared vision of success, and codifying that from tier 1. We almost always exclude them from a lot of enablement because we just want to learn from each other. We want them to learn from each other, and then the goal of the enablement team is to kind of codify what they're learning. So again, I think you bring up a critically important point on tier 1 reps. The other fascinating thing, and you'll see us publish this, is if you have attrition in tier 1 of over 15%, like almost no company ever made their base case, their number, because you can't replace the productivity with any amount of new hiring. So that's future work that we're working on, but it just shows you the importance of retention in tier 1 and tier 2 as well.
Yeah, just to add a single comment to that. Once we actually trained the tier 2 people, for a year we didn't train the tier 1 because they were high performers, but we trained tier 2 people to become as good as tier 1 people. And I think that was a good investment. I think you may have been around that, Catherine, when we did that at, I think it was HP, not to mention any names, but it was a fairly large company. And we actually had the regional managers to pick their own people that they wanted to get onto the team. So it was not we did a central education, but we had the regional managers being involved in who they wanted to send to the training. That also was quite good, because if you lose a tier 1 player, you have trained your tier 2 player to be equally as good.
Yeah, tier 2, like And if I had $100 to spend on enablement, the highest ROI is in tier 2. So you might even spend 50 of it there, because the improvement in sales productivity like is incredible in tier 2. They're just on the cusp of breaking out, as you said.
And are the tier 2s, or all those tiers, are they primarily identified based on average deal size? So that's what I saw. You think there was some numbers there? What was
We looked at average deal size, but it was just like that was just pure, how much revenue did they bring in per rep?
Okay, so total revenue per okay, so
Right.
attainment. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the primary.
In a large company like Jürgen was talking about, you might need to break it down by segment because you have so many reps. But yeah, in a smaller company, you can just do it all in aggregate.
So, Catherine, any comments or observations on the tier 3?
So tier 3 is like, if they're within their first couple years. So think about it. I don't know if you fly United Airlines a lot. I doubt maybe anyone on this call like does, but they have global services, which has like this incredible set of services that hold the plane for you. That's like the services you want a tier 1 rep to have. And then it goes 1K and then, platinum, silver, gold. Tier 3 is like, they're getting a set of services, but they don't get, the elite tier 1 and 2 services. But what happens in that approach is tier 3 reps will want the tier 2 set of services. So you just kind of see this unintended consequence of driving tier 3 productivity through these loyalty programs that airlines use. That's kind of one thing that we've seen as well. But tier 3 reps we typically hang on to because we have too many tier 4 and 5 reps already.
What should companies be doing with those tier 4 and 5 that are not progressing? Because you said a lot of them are new hires. You've got to give them a chance, right, to ramp up. So what is there a best practice approach towards them?
Yeah, what was shocking in the data is that tier 5 didn't move over a 2-year period. They stayed in tier 5. So in this case, we're just to be super direct, we're pipping them out of the organization. We're just, helping the company move along faster so we can get more at bats. Same with tier 4 as well, the ones that didn't move. Another strategy we use with tier 3 is maybe they're tier 3 because they don't have the right accounts. They're in the wrong territory. Maybe they're better as an inside seller versus a field rep. So we will look at different strategies in tier 3 as well. It just depends on the company. I think in this case, we moved a lot of the tier 3 sellers to just territories with a richer account base according to the propensity model. So hopefully we see increased sales productivity there.
Folks, we can bring ourselves to a close there. I want to thank you all for joining. It was great to have you. And Kunal, thank you so much for giving us your time. We know you're super, super busy, you're king of the hill at Bain there. Bain is like top of the hill, right? So we really appreciate your insights and your time. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a good afternoon and good morning based on wherever you are, and hope to see you on our next webinar.